It's mid-June and it's another beautiful day in the garden. Now we are starting to have some bare patches showing up in the garden due to the harvesting of certain crops. So for example, right here is where I used to have my garlic, but I just harvested it out. So we need to find something to put in there, but there is a lot of random stuff to do today. I want to get some chores done and also talk a little bit about this, which is what we call Maigret in San Diego. Now here we are on the other side of the garden where there's also a lot of work to do. May not seem like it because it's actually quite full, but back here where I tried to plant beans, they all got dug up by some raccoons. Most of them look like trash, so I decided to just pull them all. So let's go ahead and start by replanting that bed with some greens for summer. My thoughts on this bed originally were that it was going to be 2 tomatoes on the end and then just bean town. But since the beans got dug up a few times now, I don't know why the universe has it against it with me and growing beans in my garden. So let's put in some chard because nobody seems to care about it. The raccoons don't seem to want to dig it up and it seems to hold up a little bit better. This is Costa de Biatello Fine. Honestly, I just totally butchered that name. But if you guys ask me, I'll put the link in the description. This is our favorite green chard. It's not as minerally as some of the other chards. I like that it's green. I don't know why, but it just makes me feel good. And so let's go ahead and put this in. Now, this is one that I grow every single year without fail, just because it's so versatile in the kitchen. I think if we had a desert island green, it would be this one here. And I want to put it close to the edge of the bed here to try to maximize space as much as I can, because I think I will be wanting to put some tomatoes in here in the end instead of beans. I don't know, maybe I was the raccoon that dug out the beans just so I can make more space for tomatoes here. But all in all, this is a 4-foot wide bed. So I'm going to be putting 3 chard plants across. And I'm actually gonna just leave it there. I don't really need more than that. Chard will grow so fast in the summertime compared to the winter when we usually have it, that I'm not really worried about not having enough. Like that's just not going to be a problem here. If anything, there's a good chance that this will just go to bolt, like go to flower early, and I won't actually get that much chard out of it in the end. So let's just hedge our bets, put it in, not go too crazy on it, like not over transplant it so that it doesn't all go to seed, then we wasted our time and space. So instead I'm just going to put 3, and that last one there, it's just gonna go in a compost pile. I'm gonna pop into the greenhouse really quick because I'm pretty sure I got 2 determinate tomatoes and they wanna go in this bed. So here we are, I've got 2 determinate tomatoes. This one is called Candy Bell. It's a grape style tomato. It's new to me. It's determinate, so I think I could put it in here without much problem. You can see it's quite tall, and that's because I've been leaving them in my greenhouse without the fan on, which is entirely my fault. So what I'm going to do here is come, I don't know, about a foot away from the edge of the bed, and then I'm going to put this right next to an emitter. I want to give it as much water as possible. Now this is determinate, so I don't want to bury it too deep, but I will be burying it, probably up to at least the first leaf node there. So right about there is good with me. And remember, with determinate tomatoes, there's only a certain amount of growth. So you don't want to slow it down too much. You don't want to mess with it too much because it's just going to stop growing at a certain period of time. Now, the second one here is a determinate paste tomato. This is quite well-known one. It's one I haven't grown before. It's called Beaver Lodge, like 6,806 or something like that. But it is a plum tomato, determinate. Apparently it doesn't get very big and it sprawls. So I'm very curious to try it. It's also allegedly very delicious. That's gonna go right there. And we're gonna put tomato cages on both of these. I'm sure you guys have noticed that I don't tend to use tomato cages very much in my garden. It's because I tend to grow indeterminate tomatoes. Now, when I do grow determinates, I tend to just be really lazy about it and just put a bunch of bamboo stakes around it, tie a whole weave of string, and honestly has not been working that well. So I am back on the tomato cage grind, but I wanted something that would at least collapse. And this is actually one of our new designs from Epic Gardening. It's designed to be able to fold flat so you can put it away at the end of the season. It even comes apart into 2 separate pieces. So this should be perfectly sized for a determinate tomato because they don't tend to get that big. What I'm going to do is center it, push it down until it has soil contact, and now I have plenty of space for a determinate. So the way this comes together is really quite simple. Just unfold it, slide the top into these bottom little brackets here, little tubes I should say, just like that, and you're fully assembled. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop that over the Beaver Lodge tomato. I'm going to make sure that these are as in line as possible. So hopefully this works. I'm actually quite pleased to see it. And maybe I'm back on tomato cages. Now, since I have all this extra space here, I will end up reseeding that back half with beans, but you guys don't need to watch me put beans in the ground. So let's go into another section over by my herb bed, which I just cleaned up recently. So here's the area in question that we're going to be working on, and maybe Cosmo is gonna help us Yeah, you are a good boy. You love the camera, don't you? So what we're working with is this strip right over here. So originally this had a bunch of weeds, mostly just bunch grass, and a ton of nasturtiums. Now, as we approach summer, the nasturtiums will get roasted, they'll die back, and they'll start looking pretty bad, which honestly they already were. So I decided, why not just pull them and replant it with something that I actually want? Now, one thing I couldn't get rid of were all these nasturtium seeds. Once the nasturtium grows, it's going to drop hundreds of seeds. It'll probably always be in your garden. And honestly, I'm okay with it because it's not going to come back till spring. So let's figure out an herb to go here and a couple flowers to fill in that area over there. After looking in the greenhouse, I was able to find this oregano, which I believe we started all the way back in February. Now, it doesn't look great. Let me show you the roots in particular. So if you take a look at them, they don't look white. You can't really see it, but it's very brown. They look like they've died back a lot. So this is just something that's sat in a pot for way too long. Now, it should do fine once we put it in the ground. This is a perennial herb, so it has plenty of life in it, but I'm glad I caught it when I did. So what I have here is some lemon thyme that got choked by the nasturtium. Hopefully it'll come back. And next to the lemon thyme, I have some winter savory, which definitely could be pruned back because I have it all over my garden this year. So what I'm going to do is find the spot right there, as close to an emitter as possible, just to give this guy the best chance. Because if you guys have seen my previous video, you know that I've got all sorts of calamansi tree roots in here from the citrus tree that's standing right in front of me there. So even right now, the ground actually looks pretty dry. So good luck, oregano. Can't really do much more to help you except turn on the irrigation as soon as I'm done planting you. So there's the herb bed we were just working in, and over here is where we're going to be planting flowers. Now, the reason why I plant flowers here and not vegetables is because it's right beneath my calamansi tree, which I was just talking about out competing the herbs. So what I have here is a sunflower, proof of concept that it can grow, produce plenty of flowers, and do just fine. But the vegetables just don't seem to be happy here competing with that tree. So instead, we're going to be putting in some of these silvery rose straw flowers. I think I got these from a Florette Flower Farm. So hopefully they look beautiful. I know her seed is really wonderful. And over here, this was labeled as cumin, and I'm almost 100% sure these are zinnias. In fact, I am 100% sure. I could see the zinnia head right there. So I wish I had cumin, maybe next year. I guess that seed didn't come up, but let's go ahead and flower fill this section. First things first, I'm going to be removing that sunflower I showed you guys. It's already on its way out, and we'll go ahead and give this to the chickens who absolutely love eating these delicious sunflower heads and their seed. So there's the stalk, up and over it goes, and now we can fill this with flowers. So what I have is that silvery rose straw flower. I'm actually very excited for this one. I only pick out flowers that I know I'm going to like the color in the garden. So let's go ahead and put that as far from the tree as possible between two drip lines to give it its best possible chance. And man, this dirt over here, the soil is just absolutely abysmal. It's so hard. It's so dry from that calamansi. Next year, actually not even next year, probably this fall or winter, I'm going to be trenching this entire garden and putting in a root barrier. So if you guys want to see that, definitely stay tuned in the fall when I tackle that project. Now, the ground is way too hard. There's way too many other things more pressing and important to work on in the garden than dealing with that. So here is the straw flower, and I'm going to have to put the zinnia a little bit back, a little closer to that tree that I wanted to, just because I don't want it to outcompete this straw flower or vice versa. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop a hole, again, right next to the emitter here. And what I'm going to do on this one is I'm actually going to pinch it. And what that means is I'm just going to take the top right here, where the two leaves are emerging. We're going to just pinch that right off. What that's going to do is cause more branching on this. So now it'll branch out again, and it hopefully will keep it a little bit lower and more profuse with blooms. So a little bit of flowers here. I wish I could put more, but let's move on to the next one. The next thing we're going to be doing is tying up those peppers that I showed you guys how I grew faster than they otherwise normally would. Now, it has gone really well. They look fantastic. They've actually grown so fast that I really forgot to stake them up in time. So what we're going to be doing here is taking a simple bamboo stake and using it as our primary trellis. Peppers can be very simple in terms of their trellising compared to something like, say, a tomato, which I could talk about all day. So what I'm going to do is show you how I like to prep my bamboo, because oftentimes you will buy these really skinny, short ones, and they're just not that strong. So instead what I like to do is buy 8-foot sections in multi-packs of the thicker stuff, and then I like to cut it to size. But do not fall for the trap of cutting it with your pruners like we all have. If you do, what happens is that the bamboo smashes, it gets open, and when you try to jam it in the dirt, it expands and it just doesn't go in. It breaks, doesn't last long. Just never, ever cut your bamboo stakes with pruners if you could avoid it. Instead, just grab yourself a simple saw. I'm gonna show you exactly how I like to do this to keep my bamboo from splitting and to allow it to last longer. When it comes to cutting your bamboo, there's one important tip besides not using pruners, and that is to look for the joints of where the bamboo is growing. So right there is one, right there is another. That is exactly where you wanna take your saw and cut it. So I'm gonna go right on that joint or right above it, and then I'm going to start my cut. And it cuts super easy. This is way easier than any wood you've ever cut before in your life. So that is why we cut it the way we do, because now we have a solid surface to plunge into the soil instead of a super open one that's just going to be a mess. This will make your bamboo stakes last longer and they'll make them stronger. So I'm gonna cut a couple more and we'll go over there and string up those peppers. So this is the only stuff we need for trellising the peppers, a bamboo stake and some string, and literally that's it. Now let me show you what the peppers actually look like. They've grown really well. Take a look at, for example, the Sugar Rush peach, grown from seed this year. It is absolutely covered in fruit. So much fruit, it's actually absurd. This is why I don't top a lot of my peppers, because I don't want all this production on the ground. This one did it even without topping. Another example is this Moho Ahi over here, which is covered in fruit, and it just looks absolutely phenomenal. Now, the reason why these peppers look as good as they do is because of what I alluded to earlier when I said June gloom. June gloom is when we have overcast days for the majority of the day in San Diego, and we also have May gray. Now, the critical thing here is that May gray never showed up. It basically skipped May gray this year, and we had a lot of sunshine. It wasn't hot, but we had a lot of sunshine, and that sunshine allowed all these peppers to grow as well as they did. Now, the sad thing is that now that June gloom is officially here, and we have overcast skies for the majority of the day, I'm starting to see a lot more powdery mildew on things like my tomatoes and my cucumbers, for example. So it's unfortunate, but I'm happy that the peppers grew as well as they did, because they just look incredible. So now let's get to the tying up of these peppers. I actually found the perfect example for why you need to trellis your peppers. And it's this guy right here, which is the candy cane bell pepper. First of all, it's called the candy cane bell because it is a variegated plant, including on the peppers. But what you're seeing here is exactly the problem. And that is with things like bell peppers in particular that are very heavy, they could actually cause the plant to lean. And it could lean so much so that this will actually dig itself up out of the ground. And I've actually seen peppers flopped over with the root ball on the surface due to this happening. So we're going to be solving this again by tying them up. And I'll show you why it's so simple and so worth it to tie up these peppers. If you saw the video on how I planted these peppers, I talked a lot about doing the 2-in-1 or peppers holding hands technique, which is where you put two pepper plants right next to each other. And I think that's the only reason this hasn't fully toppled over, is that the other pepper was able to catch that one. But the other beauty of the system is that what you could do is you could split the difference in between your two pepper plants. So right here, for example, and I'm going to plunge, hopefully I don't hit anything, plunge straight into the ground. Ooh, that's plenty deep. Then we're going to take some twine here, and you could do it a couple different ways. What I prefer to do is to tie each pepper to the stake, and all we're looking for is the main stem of the plant before it does its primary branching. Almost every pepper will have like a primary branch point where it splits off into a bunch of different growths, and that is where you want to tie it up. I'll show you up close really quick here after I tie this up what I'm talking about. But what this is going to do is simply keep this plant from tipping over. And that's pretty much all you have to do. Once this plant becomes more mature and established, the branches should be robust enough to contain and hold the harvest without breaking. If it begins to start breaking, then you're going to want to deploy a cage, just like I showed you earlier with the tomato, or even a smaller one. We make a smaller one that's maybe a little bit better for peppers, but that is how you do it. The other option for these doubled up peppers is that you could take a longer piece of twine, like so, and then you could just loop it around both of your plants like this, tie this together, and then tie this to the stake. And that's just going to keep them as one unit. Now, I do prefer doing the one-off tie just because I think it's a little bit more robust, and honestly, it doesn't take that much more time compared to stringing up both peppers at the same time. I'm going to use this pepper to show you the main branching thing that I was talking about because it's a little bit cleaner. If you take a look at the stem, it goes up straight up vertical, and then at some point it branches. So if I were to tie up this pepper, I would loop the string right here under that primary branching. If you take a look at the ones that I just tied up, you'll see exactly that. So here is the main stem, it comes up, and then right here is the branch point where a bunch of branching happenings, and that's why I tied it right beneath it. So now these peppers can't go any further than this because the string is keeping them attached to the bamboo stake. And this is the beauty of peppers, is that you don't need anything more than that, and they should do just fine. If the single stake method hasn't worked for you in the past, or you've had broken peppers, then I highly encourage you just go to a cage. This is also from us. It's just like the tomato cage, except it's smaller. And it's honestly perfect for something like a pepper, just tall enough that the tallest branches will barely be poking out the top, and not wide, too wide that would take up too much space in your garden. So check that out. I'll put links down below, but otherwise you're pretty safe going with a single stake, but I definitely trust if you have trauma that you would want a cage. It's now past 7 o'clock. It's starting to get a little bit too dark, especially with all this June gloom. So I'm going to finish staking and tying up the rest of these peppers, but I'd love to hear if you guys have any other questions about what I talked about, or if you'd like to see anything else in the future. And I'll see you guys next time.